Hello and welcome back to my bookish channel. I'm Paul and it's just about Easter weekend and I'm taking a few days off from everything I should be doing, all the writing and stuff. But I'm still doing a couple of YouTube videos about books. One of my favorite kinds of books all my life has been tie-in novelizations. And whether they're to TV or films, or whether they're novelizations of actual episodes and scripts, or further adventures of the same characters. It doesn't matter to me. I've collected over the years many based on science fiction, horror, soap operas, movies, sequences of movies, franchises, to use that word, which I don't like much. And they're always there waiting for me, this endless collection, as I make my way through them very gradually. Um, Part of the fun of them, of course, is collecting them. I've just remembered, having set out a pile of things to talk about, a whole load of them that I'd forgotten to bring in. They're still on the shelf. Anyway, I'll talk about these first. Right, V was a mid 80s, although it's been revived since, series about aliens invading Los Angeles, and it was a kind of Nazi parallel. It was a mini series and then an ongoing series in the 80s, and we all loved it as kids. And I loved the books. A.C. Crispin, Howard Weinstein, I think. But there was a series of, I think, as many as 10 novels that followed the initial novelization. The one I remember best of all, and I'm sure I've talked about it before, is East Coast Crisis, the one set in New York where they defeat the aliens at the end using the balloons in the Macy's Day Parade. And things like the Pursuit of Diana, the Chicago Conversion, the Florida Project. By this point, Alien Swordmaster, I think we're in Japan, we're in Tokyo. This is the next one I've got waiting for me. It's been on my shelf for ages. I dread to think what I paid for this. Oh, £2.50. Not so bad. It must have been in some second-hand shop, and then I fell upon this with great excitement, I would have thought. Um, it's the tale of a Japanese-American anthropologist, and yep, it's all in. It's to do with martial arts and aliens. Right, now, Pete's Dragon. Now, I had this when I was a kid and then found it again in recent years, I think on eBay. I probably did pay over the odds for this. It's by Dewey Moffat. Now, I do know New English Library adapted lots of the old Disney movies in the 70s to novelizations. This is in the late 70s. And looking at the list, everything from Herbie Rides Again to the Shaggy DA, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, and Alice in Wonderland, the novelization of the movie of Alice in Wonderland, really makes me want to collect them all. I've got to stop. I do know that Guy N. Smith, who I was talking about just the other day, who wrote Night of the Crabs and Bats Out of Hell and all those books, the spooky books, I know that he, under a pseudonym, wrote some of these, at least one of these, which is hilarious. I love the idea of Pete's Dragon suddenly going feral. But that's not fair because Pete's Dragon is still one of my favourite movies of all time. I haven't seen it for years and years, but as a kid I knew it just about off by heart. This has got the tiniest print in the world, I have to say. Anyway, that's something I'm going to, at one point, read again. Now, Spider-Man. Somewhere I've got the other one. I have read the first Peter David novelization of the Spider-Man movie from 2002. Peter David, of course, has written lots of novelizations of films and tie-ins over the years. I really like his work, and I love what he did with the first Spider-Man movie because aside from tying into that film, it also is a kind of definitive Spider-Man novel in that it covers his origin story, all the kind of Steve Ditko Stan Lee stuff from the 60s and gives you the Spider-Man novel that you always didn't know you wanted. Somewhere I've got, yep, Spider-Man 2, which was Doctor Octopus, and 3, which was the Venom saga. So again by him. So these are waiting for me for just the right day. As I've said before, novels about superheroes, for some reason, really draw my attention. And it must be because when I was a kid and I read almost nothing but superhero comics when I was 6, 7, 8, I must have been longing for something more, but about the same characters. Perhaps it was that I wanted uh, novels about these ridiculous people. There's the Fantastic Four, also by Peter David, a very disappointing movie as far as I remember, although I think Jeremy likes it. Uh, and I seem to have notes on it on my bookmark. I can't remember the story of the first movie. I think it's just the origin tale, but I love the fact that I have this and it's waiting for me. Although I did seem to get so far and then drop it, which isn't a good sign. I still have Doctor Who books I haven't read. I've collected many over the years, especially the New Adventures and BBC books. I didn't read all of them at the time because they were coming out at the rate of two a month, a current Doctor story and a past Doctor story. And that went on for much of the 90s. So it meant you had this amazing store cupboard of Doctor Who original stories to eventually get to. And I'm still doing that. Here's a Kate Orman novel that I didn't read at the time, I haven't read since. Not for any particular reason, just that life would seem poorer if I didn't have Kate Orman Doctor Who novels still waiting for me. This is one from the mid 90s, I would have thought 95 or something. Yeah, yeah. This was the time I was completely away from the world of Doctor Who. I think I maybe read a couple per year. I was lured back, I think, by Sky Pirates by Dave Stone, which had this outrageously funny cover um, and back cover blurb, and it promised a kind of almost Terry Pratchett-esque type comedy, which it kind of had. I mean, Dave Stone is a writer who has his very own peculiar sense of humor, and it was a book I loved. Um, but still, maybe only one or two a year until I became obsessed again. I read this at the time the movie came out, Time Bandits, from 1980, I would have guessed, 81. And I remember it being, this is Charles Alverson, a nice, efficient retelling of the book, of the film, sorry. I love the lists. This is Sparrow Books published this. The lists in the back of things that you might find on the spinning racks of paperbacks where you got this. Wurzel Gummidge and the Treasure Ship by Barbara Youfton Todd, 85p. One of the original Wurzel Gummidge books, and I don't remember ever seeing that one. K9 and the Missing Planet by David Martin. Murder, She Wrote is a series I love on TV, and ever since about 2006, I've loved the books as well, although I've not read one for a while. This is Brandy and Bullets by Jessica Fletcher and Donald Bain. Now, obviously, Donald Bain was the writer he very um, generously offers half his authorship to the fictional character of Jessica Fletcher. I love the fact these books have gone on for years and years since the series finished. The series must have finished in 1990. This book came out in 95, but I do know they're still going with a different writer in charge now. The idea that she's somehow 105 and still solving mysteries is irresistible to me. Um, and she must be, because the books have kept pace with time, as far as I know. They're still set in the present. Yep, that sounds great. So that's waiting for me. Now, Star Trek novels in the kind of expanded universe of Star Trek are one of my guilty pleasures. And I've said before, there's no such thing as guilty pleasures, there's just pleasures. But it is slightly guilty as well because um, I'm not sure I even like Star Trek on TV anymore. When Jeremy puts it on, I kind of groan, and he will put on Star Trek at any given opportunity. I especially love ones from the 1980s. For some reason, they just uh, do something particular. I don't know what it is. Uhura's Song by Janet Kagan. And anyone's with Uhura at the center of it as well, for some reason. I've talked before about Tears of the Singers by Melinda Snodgrass, which is the one where she shags Rick Wakeman on a planet full of seals. This is about graceful cat-like beings, and I think the blurb hints that Uhura has a kind of lesbian affair with a cat person. Well worth reading. Killing Time by Della Van Hees or Hees. This is from 1990. And it was one that was published by Titan and early in their kind of reprints of American things. And I remember this coming out. And by then, because I was at college, I wasn't reading as many Star Trek books. I was probably reading Iris Murdoch and Doris Lessing and all that stuff. Oh, this is a alternate version of reality, an alternate dimension. In this universe, Kirk is an embittered young ensign, and Spock is a besieged starship commander, lured into a Romulan trap. I was always bored when the Romulans came in. I don't know why. Captain Spock and Ensign Kirk must free themselves, both of their captors and their own altered selves, before the galaxy hurtles towards total destruction. Look at them, these 80s women on the front, kind of dynasty style heroines on the front, or villains, with 80s makeup. Brilliant. More superheroes. These are Peter David again, doing Batman Forever. I'd love to know what he does with Batman. And Batman and Robin. Doesn't say. Oh, Michael Jan Friedman, another Star Trek person. I should have somewhere, maybe I don't, the first two Batman movies, the Tim Burton ones. Tim Burton's films don't seem well served, as far as I know, with novelizations, and yet he seems like someone that should be novelized, should be given kind of slightly eccentric, peculiar novels. I wonder. I should look for some of those. Is there a novelization of Beetlejuice? I don't know. Or his version of Dark Shadows. Juliet Bravo. This, I've only just realised, the novelization's by Molly Hardwick, who also novelised lots of Upstairs, Downstairs, which was the series that's over there on my shelf behind stuff in about 10 volumes, which I adore. I love the TV show. I love the books. Turns out Juliet Bravo was written by Ian Kennedy Martin, who created The Sweeney. I hadn't realised the link. Juliet Bravo was a kind of very gentle Yorkshire set serial in the early 80s, late 70s about a female police officer. A kind of very gentle version of Happy Valley. And I do wonder if Happy Valley is in some way an attempt to update Juliet Bravo all those years later. Anyway, Molly Hardwick did a good job of Upstairs, Downstairs and The Duchess of Duke Street. So that's waiting in my pile of novelizations, along with Starsky and Hutch. These books used to be everywhere. There was a whole pile of them. I'm not sure how many they did. This was 75. Uh, it might be the first one. Yep. Max Franklin novelizing, by the looks of it, the first Starsky and Hutch book. The next one is going to be called Kill Huggy Bear, apparently. And Star Trek adverts at the back. Yep. Intensely nostalgic. It makes you want novelizations of The Bionic Woman and The Bionic Man. It's that time. and you think they'd be novelizations written by people who haven't even watched the TV show. They'd be that cool. Land of the Giants. This was a present from my friend Deborah. Murray Leinster, who was a proper science fiction writer, doing novelizations for World Distributors. This is published by, based in Manchester, based on Lever Street. As I said before, they didn't just do annuals, they did pulpy novels as well. Star Wars is another kind of guilty pleasure, and it has been ever since. Stop saying guilty. This is joy. It has been since 1977 or 8, when the first novelization came out, and then the sequel, Splinter of the Mind's Eye, and then again in the early 90s when they started doing original novels, and over the years, various ones that have leapt out. I once had to compete and write on spec a first chapter based on material sent out by the publisher to do a Star Wars novel, and it didn't happen for me, which was a shame. That would have been fun. I still think mine would have been good. I don't think they were looking for what I was doing with it. Right, this is the Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina, edited by Kevin J. Anderson. 95. So well before all the kind of crappy movies. Before they did the prequel movies, before they even shoved the extra stuff on the old movies using ropey CGI, where the monsters come out and look at the camera and wave in the extra bits, or the kind of more recent crappy trilogy with characters, all of whom were completely forgettable, as far as I could tell. I've loved their TV shows. I think I've loved all of them, actually. Anyway, it was more fun perhaps when there was no new stuff, just a universe to explore in books, and this gives a story to each of those shady characters you see in the cantina on Mos Eisley. Or as my friend Bill used to say, every gay bar ever. And we used to walk into the City Bar in Lancaster, and he'd say we were walking into the cantina in Star Wars, or worse, on a particularly bad night, Jabba's Palace. Lots of interesting people in here. A.C. Crispin, whose name I always look out for when it comes to Star Trek or Star Wars. She writes about Muftak and Cabe, two of the more slightly obscure creatures in the Mos Eisley cantina. When I was a kid and you collected the Star Wars figures, they gave names to these creatures in the second wave, I think, of figures, when they were kind of really scraping the bottom of the barrel and doing figures of background characters. And in our heads, all these characters had backstories. Greedo, Hammerhead, Snaggletooth. In a way, you don't want official ones. But then with tie-in fiction, nothing's official, is it? It's all apocrypha, and that's good. Ron Hutchinson, Connie with Stephanie Beacham, a kind of tacky 80s version of, well, it's sold as a version of kind of Dynasty and all that stuff. But one of those series that come and go, and I'm not sure people remember them, but there was a novelization, and the novelization remains. Robin of Sherwood, Time of the Wolf, Richard Carpenter. Um, Richard Carpenter, of course, amazing that he does his own novelization. That's great. He was a great writer. Everything he did, I think, on TV I loved. Dick Turpin, Robin of Sherwood, Ghosts of Motley Hall. These are Flash Gordon tie-ins. And Plague of Sound and Lion Men of Mongo by Alex Raymond. Now, I think these are to tie in with the... No, they're not. They're 77. They're before the movie. Yet they've got the movie covers because they were clearly reprinted later. Starbucks, who were linked to Target books. And these are produced to look very much like Doctor Who novelizations, and clearly that's the readership they were hoping uh, to cash in on. This is the first two: Lion Men of Mongo, The Plague of Sound. Then there's The Space Circus, The Time Trap of Ming the Eighth, Witch Queen of Mongo, and The War of the Cybernauts. Amazing. I've read one of these. I think it was the Time Trap of Ming the Eighth, and these are waiting for me. They're more amusing than you expect and more eccentric. I think they're older, much older, and based on, I don't know, the comic strips, uh, repackaged to look more modern than they are. And some of the kind of archaicisms are amusing, shall we say. This series, to me, is mind blowing. This exists. When I was 8, I read and reread the original novelization of Battlestar Galactica, and I watched the TV show. We all watched that. I didn't realize every single episode had been novelized. And so in more recent years, I think, uh, after 2005 or whatever, when I started reading book blogs, um, I realized that these were available, that so many had been done. And this is book 6, The Living Legend. The one you asked for, it says on the front, from your all-time favorite episodes. My favorite episode could well be the one, apart from the original, where they get the casino planet with the giant insects. The one with Patrick McNee playing the devil. It's probably my favorite. Fame 2 by Lisa Todd, who I found out since is a science fiction writer in disguise. It's Stephen Gallagher, as far as I know. This was 83, and I've read the first one at the end of last year, and I've had these for years and years. I loved the kids from Fame, and I loved Fame the movie. And for years, the only tie-in I had was the first annual, written by Mike Wilde, who also wrote the K9 annual for World Distributors in Manchester. I wasn't aware of these novelizations, and the first one was fantastic. I'm sure this one is as well. It was a great series, and people forget that. They just think it was tacky and about people in leotards, which it was, but every episode was great. Right, I do have a parcel of um, things coming from eBay, tie-ins all written by the same person, and I read something about her, and I've forgotten her name now, and she's the kind of master of tie-ins in America. She's had this long career, and she novelized things like Funny Lady, the Barbara Streisand movie, and Annie, and Staying Alive. And so I've got a parcel of those coming at some point. Dirt cheap, because nobody wants novelizations like that. Anyway, I'm going to go. Uh, I'm going to just do some reading this weekend, I think. That's what I'm going to do. I hope you're well, and that you will press like and subscribe and all those things, and have a great weekend. And I will see you soon again. I'm just looking for my little remote button to switch you off. See you again in another episode of this. Is it working? No. Oh, never mind.